Right. So, obviously, just 1 minute before 6 or just 6 p.m., and we're beginning our discussion on life sciences. And now, the couple of things that remain are critically important. And we look at the content for this module. Right. So, as part of your preparation for the life sciences exam, paper 2 is very important to note that you'll have both multiple choice and essay type questions, etc., etc., and questions where you will be expected to describe certain phenomena. Right. So there are various options that are provided as possible answers to the following questions. Choose the correct answer and write only the letter A to D next to the question. Numbers 1.1.1 to 1.1.9 in your answer book. For example, 1.1.10 is D. Right, the kingdom. Right, so we're looking at a couple of questions that you need to know here. Right, so there are a lot of questions, obviously, we shall be looking at. But now we are discussing the multiple choice first. Right, the kingdom to which the prokaryotic unicellular organisms belong. So there's certain kingdoms that you need to know. We're here to discuss a lot of these kingdoms in detail, but now we look at a synopsis of the exam structure, some skeletal structure. Right. So what the kingdom to which the prokaryotic unicellular organisms belong? What kingdom is that? Right. Obviously, I'm sure you have seen that. If you haven't seen that, we have to have a thorough look at those. But obviously, we know that they actually belong to the Monere kingdom. So at this point, they most certainly belong to the Monere kingdom. Right. So it's something you need to know. Right. So the unicellular organisms belong to the Monere kingdom. And therefore, the correct option here, when you're talking about the unicellular organisms and the kingdom to which they belong to the Monera kingdom. Okay, so that's one thing you need to note. So I'm here to look at a thorough discussion on different kingdoms to which, for instance, the prokaryotics or unicellular organisms belong, and multiple other kingdoms. Right, so it's very important to know which of the following is a characteristic feature of a virus. Okay, so obviously we have viruses and bacteria, etc. But which of the following is a characteristic feature of a virus? Okay, so is it a cell membrane? Is it a protein coat? Is it a nucleus? Or chromosomes? Obviously, we know very well that the characteristic feature, right, characteristic feature, what characterizes a virus is the notion of what you call a protein coat, is the notion of what we term a protein coat. Right. Moreover, it's very important to understand the implications of certain statements in life sciences. Okay, for example, which of the statements below represent a similarity between the bryophytes and the pterophytes? Right, so in other words, there are statements below, but which of them actually represents a similarity between the bryophytes and the pterophytes? So in other words, we understand that there exists a similarity between these particular species. Right, and we look at option A, for instance, both divisions have vascular tissue. B, both divisions reproduce by means of spores. C, both divisions have a dominant sporophyte generation. D, both divisions are the thallus plants. So, which actually option when it comes to the similarity between the bryophytes and the pterophytes? Okay, so it's an obvious one, this one. It's most certainly a giveaway because we know very well, and we're to discuss this in detail, that both divisions reproduce. Okay, they reproduce by means of spores. By means of spores. So in other words, speaking of the similarity between the bryophytes and the pterophytes, it is obvious, right? And this was most certainly a giveaway, right? It's obvious that both divisions reproduce by means of spores. Okay. Moreover, it's very important that genetics is understood. Offspring and the parent relationship, offspring and parent relationship. For instance, you need to be able to start at the list below, right? Starting the list below from the first Roman figure to the fourth Roman figure. Offspring are genetically identical to the parent. Offspring are genetically different from each other. Only one individual is required for reproduction. Right, increases chance of survival. Which of the above statements represent an advantage of sexual reproduction? So in other words, as part of the grade 11 syllabus, sexual reproduction is at the heart of these grade 11 curriculum. So which option under sexual reproduction here, which of the above statements represents or which of the above statements represent an advantage of sexual reproduction? So we look at that one, and that is 1.1.4. So obviously, I'm sure that sexual reproduction is actually one of the most interesting topics and very easy ones. Right, so looking at 1.1.4, surely the correct option will have to be a student must realize that offspring are genetically different from each other, okay? Right, and now we're looking at which of the following statements above represent an advantage of sexual reproduction. Right, so we actually are able to see that offspring are genetically different from each other in actually sexual reproduction, but also in the notion of genetics, right? But moreover, it is important to note that you have that there is an increase, or this increases a chance of survival. So if we look at the advantages of sexual reproduction, surely we agree that sexual reproduction increases chance of survival, but also we agree that offspring are most certainly genetically different from each other. So in a discussion of this nature, we'll most certainly agree that the correct option here would have to be option D. Would have to be option D. Okay, we continue. We're here to discuss this in some detail, okay, to look at the more advantages of sexual reproduction. Right, but obviously it's clear that sexual reproduction increases the chance of survival, but also, offspring are most certainly genetically different from each other. Okay, so the rest are out. You can't say only one individual is required for reproduction. It's most certainly not the case. But the idea of saying offspring are genetically identical to the parent, so also that is out. And so we note those two options there, Roman figure 2 and Roman figure 4, so that the correct option becomes option D. Next. Obviously, it's very important that we study bird behavior. We study birds as birds of the air. But now, start with the picture below, which shows the feeding habits of 6 birds that all live on the same muddy lake shore. Okay, so now this is an interesting one. Here the birds, we can see them, but do they have feeding habits? Okay, you can really see that some of these birds appear to actually be scavenging, and as they are scavenging for food, they have different feeding habits of the 6 birds, 1, 2, 2, 4, 6, that all live on the same muddy lake shore. So they live on the lake shore. Which of the following community interactions does this picture best represent? Right, so do they represent this picture? Does the picture represent parasitism? Does it actually focus on mutualism? Does this picture look at resource partitioning? Does this picture focus on commensalism? And so we look at these in detail. Right, we look at these in detail. What does this picture about the birds show us? Does it show that these birds, this picture demonstrate parasitism, mutualism, resource partitioning, or commensalism? Okay, it's an obvious one, this one. It was most certainly a giveaway. I'm going to look at a lot of questions of this nature. But surely, if you look at these very carefully, this actually demonstrates a notion we call resource partitioning. And I'm yet to look at these in detail. Resource partitioning. Right, so we really can see that they live on a lake shore, living on a lake shore. They are scavenging for food. Okay, and as they're scavenging, there you really can see that it's none of the other options but resource partitioning, because you can really see each one has its own position and is scavenging for food. Next question. Okay, we need to know and understand seeds very well. Okay, seeds remain at the heart of the grade 11 life sciences syllabus. And we shall discuss different types of seeds. Right, we shall discuss different types of seeds. Now let's look at this question. Let's look at this question. Okay. Seeds are actually not seeds that are not enclosed in a fruit. So we need to discuss, and we shall discuss different types of seeds, but I'm doing a survey here. I'm interested in knowing what you think about this. Some of the questions I'm going to ask you, I'm not fault hunting, but I'm trying to see how much you have covered. But this one is the full scope. It's a full scope of the November assessment. So for November, you need to know all these things. But I know that your teacher might have not covered all of them. So, but you need to know all of these. Okay. Right. So this is extremely important. For example, as we're looking at 1.1.6, right, there are certain seeds that are not enclosed in a fruit. What kinds of seeds are these that are not
Sorry, sir.
enclosed in a... Yes, please.
Can I try to attempt this?
Yes, you wish to try it.
I think it's C.
Yes. Well done. Okay, I'm glad that you're able to get that one right. So it's C, obviously, because these are most certainly naked seeds. Okay, because obviously such seeds are not enclosed in a fruit. So it's very important that, and we're yet to discuss different kinds of seeds. Okay, next question. Okay, which of the following would most affect the quality of water? Building of a dam in a water catchment area, the construction of a golf estate on a wetland area, the alien invasive plants growing around a dam, seepage of water through pyrite rock in mines. Right. So we're looking at the kinds of questions we need to be able to answer, but I'm yet to look at these in detail. However, in actually view of this, which of the following would most affect the quality of water? Right. So it's obvious, this one. Right. So obviously we agree that it cannot be A because the building of a dam in a water catchment area, building a dam really cannot affect the quality of water. The construction of a golf estate in a wetland area, no, we cannot affect the quality of water. Right. The alien invasive plants growing around a dam, normally they grow around dams, these kinds of invasive plants, but they're natural. Normally they're always plants that grow in dams, etc., or around dams. So the option it's going to be actually the seepage of water through a pyrite rock in mines. So we agree that now there's water pollution we need to understand, and this question hinges on water pollution. So we need to understand that water gets polluted. And now we need to understand that the notion of what we call pyrite rock in mines, the mines themselves are at the heart of this because they like doing this. They normally have a lot of, we speak about acid mine drainage. So we understand that the effect of mine operations on the quality of water we drink, in particular, if there's seepage of water through the pyrite rock in mines, and therefore that would most certainly be the correct response there. Okay, right, we continue. We continue. We continue. Next question. Okay. As part of what we need to know, there's something we call thermal pollution. Okay, there are different forms of pollution that we need to understand, but thermal pollution is one of them. And you might have heard of this. And if you haven't, we're here to discuss different forms of pollution in detail. But thermal pollution affects the amount of dissolved oxygen present in water. The graph below, so we understand this, the effect of this. So effectively, thermal pollution affects the amount of dissolved oxygen present in water. The graph below indicates how the oxygen content of water in a river changes with an increase in temperature. So we are looking at the graph. What does this graph show? It actually indicates how the oxygen content of water in a river changes with an increase in temperature. All right. Now, what do we observe from this graph? Okay, let's look at the question that follows there. The following conclusion can be drawn from the graph. What conclusion can we draw? Because now, if you look at the oxygen content versus temperature. So as the temperature increases, the oxygen content also decreases. Well, it decreases when the temperature increases. You can see the temperature changing from 8 to 16 to 24, etc. So we are moving in steps of 8 degrees on the Celsius, 8 degrees Celsius on the horizontal axis. And now we're looking at the oxygen content, which is milligrams per liter on the vertical axis. Right. And therefore, we are actually now looking at this very, very carefully. And we are thinking of what the option should be. Right. I'm giving you like 2 minutes to look at this question and think about it. And obviously, we shall look at the answer together and discuss it. Right. So think about it in 2 minutes. I'll give you just a chance to share your thoughts. It's a random thing. I always do this. All right. Okay, so I'm pausing for you to think I don't want to. Right. Okay. Okay. Some of these things you might have not seen them. We're going to discuss them.
Sir?
Yes, please.
Oh, I thought you were talking to me.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, okay. Never mind. I'm here. All right. I'm here. I'm here. I'm just talking so that you can know that I'm here. Okay, because if I'm quiet, then you'll be like, okay, he's not here. All right.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I know that I've not made my picture available there or anything like that. Okay. Because yeah, it's just I don't prefer to have my picture on the screen. I would do that. All right. But now look at this carefully. Let's think of this question. So we're looking at right, question 1.1.8. Right. So we're saying the following conclusion can be drawn from the graph, but what I was saying here was when the oxygen content here, obviously you can see that as we go up here, as the temperature increases like this, the oxygen content is going down, so it's decreasing like this. So the following conclusion can be drawn from the graph. Um, okay, we continue. Um, right, so we think of this. Okay. The following conclusion can be drawn from the graph, and we ask ourselves what conclusion can be drawn from the graph. And you're thinking about it. All right. So let's look at A. As the temperature, right. Okay. All right. I'm thinking, I'm giving you a chance to think about it. Right. Right. So okay. Okay. Right. As the temperature increases, the oxygen content increases. And you can see that as the temperature increases, the oxygen content appears to be going down. Okay. At 24 degrees, for example, at 24 degrees Celsius, the oxygen content of the water would have halved. As water temperature increases, the oxygen content decreases. Okay. A further increase in temperature would increase oxygen levels in the water. So we are asking the question then, which one is the correct answer here? Options.
So
Yes, what do you think?
it's C, no? It's C.
Please come again. Yes,
I
it's
think it's
obviously
C.
C, right? Because as the water, as the water temperature increases, the oxygen content decreases, right? You can see as the obviously the temperature increases, the oxygen content decreases. So the correct option is C there. Okay, good. We're just learning how to analyze graphs, but in view of what you call thermal pollution, what is thermal pollution? Right. So obviously thermal associates with heat. So it has to do with heat. Now, when we have increases in temperature, and we really are saying that the thermal pollution affects the amount of dissolved oxygen present in water. Okay. So in other words, obviously we understand that the increase in temperature has an effect on the amount of oxygen that's dissolved or that's rather present in water. Next question. So this is one form of pollution, thermal pollution. All right. It's very important that you understand the effect of thermal pollution. So we get into some discussion about thermal pollution, the changes in temperature, its effect on water, and its effect on living species in water, because we have organisms that live in water, like fish, for instance, your sharks and other things. Right. So the following graph, for instance, refers to question 1.1.8 and 1.1.9. So here's the graph. Right. Thermal pollution itself affects the amount of dissolved oxygen present in water. Right. So the graph below indicates how the oxygen content of water in a river changes with an increase in temperature. Right. So we are looking at that the oxygen content of water with an increase in temperature. Right, a certain species of fish can survive in water because we're looking at how the fish and the organisms live under these conditions when the temperatures are so high or so low. Right, so a certain species of fish can survive in water with a minimum oxygen content of 8 milligrams per liter. At which temperature would you expect to find these fish in the river? Okay, so here comes the question. At 40 degrees Celsius, at 35 degrees Celsius, at 32 degrees Celsius, at 24 degrees Celsius. We're asking the question in 1.1.9, right? At which temperature would you expect to find these fish in the river? Okay, so this is just about the graph. It's about the graph. Okay, because now you are really saying, remember, it can actually um, these species of fish can survive in water with a minimum oxygen content of 8 milligrams per liter. Right. So if you have 8 milligrams per liter, you are somewhere here on average. Okay, just about there. So if you have 8 milligrams per liter, so what would the temperature be in 1.1.9? Sorry, that's pretty obvious. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Right, so my line is not straight, but um, a reasonable option to this would have to be, if you put a ruler, I could put a ruler there. Okay, never mind that. I could put a ruler just to bring a straight line. Right. So in other words, if you draw from 8, okay. Uh-huh. Right. So if you look very carefully, if you draw here, ideally it comes close to that. Okay. Obviously the line is not straight, but now that would mean that the temperature would be about that. So it means therefore the correct option will have to be 24 degrees Celsius. Okay. Okay, continue. Okay, so this one is easy. It's 24 degrees Celsius. So in other words, if the minimum oxygen content is 8 milligrams per liter, you really, from reading the graph, the option would have to be option D. It's just about 24 degrees Celsius. Just note that. Okay, so you need to use a ruler. Please, when you get to this question, what do? You take your ruler and you put it here. so that you just have a very careful analysis. Okay. So just note that. Just note that. Okay. Just note that. Just note that. Okay. So you continue. Okay. Next question. I was saying you need to use your ruler there when you get to those questions like that. Okay. You need to use your ruler. Place your ruler there and make sure you have some careful, some rather more accurate analysis of the whole thing. Okay. For right. Okay. Okay, look at the next question. Okay, next question. Okay, there are certain biological terms that you need to know, and we shall look at a lot of the biological terms. But one of our aims is to make sure that you are familiar with a lot of the terms that the grade 11s need to know. Right. For example, you need to be able to give the correct biological term for each of the right. We continue. Okay, so we continue. Okay. You must be able to give the correct biological term for each of the following descriptions. You must be able to write only the term next to the correct question numbers. Right. So, for example, in the answer book, okay. So for 1.2.1 to 1.2.8, symmetry found in porifera. Right, the symmetry found in porifera. Right, so now if you look at symmetry found in what? In porifera. Right, so symmetry found in porifera. What is the correct biological term for that? What do we call the symmetry that is found in what? In porifera. We're looking for the correct biological term. So what's the answer to this? Okay, it's obvious. I know that you know this. I know that you know this. Right, the symmetry that is found in porifera is actually called asymmetry. It's actually called asymmetry. Right, so the symmetry found in porifera is actually called asymmetry. Okay, so that is the biological term for symmetry found in what? In porifera. Okay, so in other words, you must know the definition of asymmetry. What is asymmetry? Asymmetry refers to the symmetry that is found in porifera. Okay, we have to look at a lot of these descriptions so that you can be in a position to familiarize yourself with them. I'm yet to spend a lot of time on these. Right. So 1.2.2, the the dominant generation in the life cycle of ferns. The dominant generation in the life cycle of ferns. Okay, we must be able to define terms in life sciences, one of which is we define the term and we say the dominant generation in the life cycle of ferns is called what? Right, so obviously these are very easy definitions and we're yet to spend a lot of time on these and I'm yet to spend more time, shall play around with this more, right? Because now we are training you to master assessment here. So you need to write down the notes You need to write down these things at the end of the discussion. Right. So the dominant generation, the life cycle of cells, right? What do we call the dominant generation? It is called the sporophyte. It's called the sporo. It's called the sporophyte. Okay, it's called the sporophyte. Right? So I'm giving you like 2 minutes. 2 minutes to try and do 1.2.3. Name the vector responsible for transmitting malaria. Malaria is a big problem, especially in the rainy seasons across Africa. And we have seen Bill Gates, which is amongst the wealthiest in the world, the co-founder of Microsoft, coming to Africa to donate nets, malaria nets and things, okay? So now we agree that the transmission of malaria is a huge problem, but now there is a vector responsible for transmitting malaria, and this vector has a name. So I'm giving you like 2 minutes and I'm coming back just now. Hello, my dear. Hello, my dear. Hello, my dear. Okay, my dear. All right, I'm right back. All right, I sometimes give you some minutes or so to obviously get to think and to reflect on the things you've learned. Not everything you have learned, and I don't expect you to remember everything now, but yeah, I'm yet to like overwhelm you with a lot of these concepts, that you need to master. But 1.2.3, we understand that the the vector responsible for transmitting malaria has a specific name, all right? And we call it the Anopheles. We call it the Anopheles. Anopheles mosquito. Okay. We call that the Anopheles mosquito. Right, so we have that one. We call that the Anopheles mosquito. Right, so you need to just note that. Right, so the Anopheles mosquito is the vector responsible for transmitting malaria. We shall look at different forms of vectors, okay? Different forms of vectors, because these vectors cause huge problems in society. They make people sick. They make people to feel feverish and so on. And now there are different forms of vectors we shall look at. But now we're looking at a specific kind of vector that is responsible for the transmission of malaria, and that is called the Anopheles mosquito. Just note that. Next, there is the male whale of a flower. The male well of a flower. So, in other words, flowers are very important. We're yet to look at flowers in detail. So, but now I'm just giving some of the most important biological terms that must be known for exam purposes. Right. So, the male well of a flower. What do we call the male well of a flower? Right. So, that one you must be knowing it.
Sorry, sir. Can I try this one?
You should try it.
I can't pronounce the name, but I'll spell it out for you.
Okay. Yes.
It's Androecium.
Yes, that's actually the andro. That's correct. Well done. It's actually the andro Androecium. Androecium. Right, that is the Androecium. Right, the Androecium is the main whale of a flower. We were here to discuss flowers anyway, but now I'm just discussing the terms you need to know for exam purposes. Right, we are here to discuss flowers and the components of flowers. Using an organism's natural predator to control their number. Okay, there is something about this 1.2.5. We need one term, one biological term that describes using an organism's natural predator to control their number. What do we call these? That's easy. I know it's very, very popular and we learn this all the time. And we're going to discuss it a lot in the questions that are coming and in a lot of the theory that is coming. Right. But now, using an organism's natural predator to control their number. What is this? An organism's natural predator to control their number? Right. So, obviously, this one has two possible names, so you can state it in two ways. Either you say it is because we're speaking about an organism's natural predator. These organisms, natural predator, to control their number. You want to control their number? This is called it's called biological control. It's called biological control. If you do not want to call it biological control, we call it bio control. So it's the same thing. So you can call it in any of these two ways. So you can say bio control if you don't want to say biological control. So bio control is the short version of biological control, because biological control is like a compound word. It has like two words in it, but now you can reduce it to one word, which is like a compound word. So biological control would therefore mean we are essentially looking at an organism, using an organism's natural predator to control their number. That's biological control. How do you see this? Okay, obviously you agree that if you go to the game park, you go to the zoo. If you go to the zoo, you come across animals there, you come across species, and then now you come across natural predators. And the natural predators are used to control the numbers of organisms, because the organism's natural predator is used to control the number of the organisms, you know. Because now, for example, if you have lots of impalas, you can put a lot of predators to feed on the impalas so that the number of the impalas can go down. So that's biological control. If you decide to deploy lots of lions and tigers, you know, because you know very well that the lions are going to feed on the impalas. So that is what we're talking about. Next question. The close relationship between two organisms where both organisms benefit. Okay, this one is easy. Right, so we shall be discussing also the notion of relationships between two organisms. But if we discuss the relationship between two organisms where both organisms benefit, okay, we're yet to define all these concepts here. But here we're saying both organisms benefit. What do we call these? It's obvious. 1.2.6. Okay, in other words, there is a mutual relationship and it's called mutualism. It is called mutualism. Okay, because now we were saying both organisms benefit. It is called mutualism because now both of these are excited and they benefit from this relationship. So it is a relationship between two organisms where both of them are excited and they have benefits. They benefit. Okay, next question. Okay, I'm just looking at some of the concepts you need to know for exam, but we're here to look at mostly these in detail, but a lot more theory. That's the kinds of concepts in the biological terms you need to know. Okay, if you look at 1.2.7, for example, illegal hunting or removal of organisms. Some people hunt illegally. Somebody goes to the game park and the person starts hunting in the park. Why do the person normally people need to have licenses for hunting, you know? We call the trophy hunters, or those trophy hunters, they need to have licenses to do hunting. But now, sometimes there are those illegal ones who just go there with their rifles and they want to shoot down. Ah, they do a lot of this. Um, they dehorn the rhinos. They dehorn the rhinos. They go to the park because they want the horns of the rhinos. Okay, so now we call that rhino poaching. So some people go there to poach the rhinos. All right, so it's part of the problem. But what do we call illegal hunting or removal of organisms? I've already given the answer. Okay, so in 1.2.7, the guys who go to the park, maybe Kruger National Park or any other park in South Africa to hunt for organisms, then they want to remove the organisms from the park. These guys are wrong and they need to be arrested. They must be put behind bars. But now, what do we call the illegal hunting? There's one term for it. It's called poaching. It's called poaching. Because somebody, and normally these made a lot of news when everybody was speaking about rhino poaching. Rhino poaching because they go there to poach the rhinos. They're removing the rhinos. They're hunting for the what? For the rhinos because they want their horns. Because they know very well that in China the Chinese want the horns. The Chinese believe that if you have the horns are medicine. They're medicinal. That's what the Chinese believe. Okay, so it's called poaching. Okay, now there's a biological term, one term, that refers to growing only one type of crop of a given area. If you have a given area, you grow only one type of crop over that given area. Maybe you grow only maize there, or you grow only beans, you know, you grow only potatoes. If you decide to grow only potatoes, what do you call that? Or you grow only maize. You grow
Can I
one.
try this one, sir?
Yes, please.
It's monoculture.
Yes, well done. It's monoculture. Okay, I'm just bringing this across because they are amongst the most important of the concepts you must know for exam purposes. Okay, way to discuss a lot of them. Right, so next question. It's very important that you also are able to um, match columns, you know. You must be able to indicate whether each of the elements in column 1 applies to A only, B only, both A and B, or none of the terms of the items in column 2. Write A only, B only, both A and B, none. Right. Next to the question numbers 1.3.1 to 1.3.3 in the answer book. Okay. Let's look at column 1. What is column 1 saying? The advantage of fungi, column 2, is it wine? Is it yogurt? 1.3.2, root-like structures in moss. Are they the thallus or the hyphae? The eutrophication. Column 2, does it match? A only, B only, or both A and B? So when it comes to eutrophication, high nutrient content, we have what we call the algal bloom. Okay, so we have all these. So the question becomes, in 1.3.1, let's start with 1.3.1 because we're looking at one at a time. So the advantage of fungi, so what should the answer be here? Either you say A only, or you say B only, or you say both A and B. It can be both, or you can say it's none of them, of the items in column 2. So write A only, B only next, or no, next to the question numbers 1.0. So the way you're going to answer this one, right? So how do you answer? So you write 1.3.1, and then you look advantage of fungi. What is it? Is it wine or is it yogurt? Okay, this one is an obvious one because we need to know the advantage of fungi, right? And the advantage of fungi is actually in the production of wine. So obviously at this point, it is in the production of wine. So it is A only. It is A only. And then now you look at 1.3.2. What is this one? Root-like structures in moss. What do you call the root-like structures in moss? Are they the thallus or are they the hyphae, for example? So you look at any of these. So the root-like structures in moss, are they thallus or are they hyphae? Right. Obviously, we have roughly discussed the thallus. We've seen that term before. Um, right. So all right. We actually obviously look at that one there. We had to look at these terms and define them in full. So, but now looking at these here, root-like structures in Morse, 1.3.2, surely it is not thallus and it is not hyphae as well. So it is most certainly none of those. None of those. And then we look at the last one, 1.3.3. Eutrophication. What is it? So if we're matching the columns, does it have anything to do with high nutrient content? Does it have anything to do with what called the algal bloom? So now you have much of the algae in the water body, uh, in the dam, blooming, and growing uncontrollably. All right. So if you look at 1.3.3 eutrophication, what is that one? Right. Obviously, it is both of these. So at this point, we're going to say it is both A and B. So obviously, we know very well that eutrophication relates to high nutrient content, but also the algal bloom. There we go. We are happy. Right. So because eutrophication has to do with the relates to high nutrient content in algal bloom. Because right. So normally when there is eutrophication, you have that the algae grows uncontrollably. It blooms there in the bodies of water. Okay, so we have discussed and we are looking at more discussions on life sciences. Right. So diagrams in life sciences are very important, like your Paleozoic, right, and your Mesozoic, right, which are referred to, and obviously your Cenozoic as well, right. So these are terms that remain extremely important, that must be known, right. And the idea of what you call algae, the charophytes, the bryophytes, the pterophytes, the gymnosperms, and the angiosperms. Right. So you look at these here. You need to be able to name the kingdom to which the above organisms belong. So, as I said, we're here to discuss a lot of the kingdoms, and the notion of kingdoms is coming to the surface for the second time today in our discussion right here. Then we are saying, name the kingdom to which the above organisms belong. What kingdom is this? Right. So now, if you look at the organisms there, what kingdom to what kingdom there do the above organisms belong? Right. Obviously, we have mentioned the gymnosperms, the angiosperms, the pterophytes, the bryophytes, the charophytes, etc. And we looked at the fact that we have millions of years ago, the MYA. the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. So, right, the kingdom to which the above organisms belong, they actually belong to one kingdom, and the kingdom in 1.4.1, so this would be the answer. They belong to the Plantae. They belong to the Plantae. They belong to the Plantae. Let me just write that clearly. Right, so they belong to the Plantae. Right, so where do they belong? They belong to the Plantae. So now we're then saying, name the kingdom to which the above organisms belong. So the above organisms here as mentioned, they belong to the Plantae collectively. So if we pick up, if we talk of the Plantae, we're speaking of the organisms that we've just mentioned there and that appear in the diagrams below. Okay, the diagrams there. Okay, next question. Next question. Okay, we're just familiarizing ourselves with some of the terms that must be known for exam purposes. We're here to look at much of the theory that you need to know, and we're going to discuss it together. Okay, we're going to discuss the notes that you need to know. 1.4.2, you must be able to, we've seen the diagrams below, but name the plant divisions. There are certain plant divisions that were found on Earth during the Paleozoic era. Okay, this Paleozoic era, now we are looking at the millions of years ago, right? And then now, obviously, we are looking at zero, and then now you're looking at the millions of years. You have 100 million years, so you have 200 million, 300 million, 600 million, and then now you have the Paleozoic and the Mesozoic, etc. Okay, so this is very interesting. So you can really see that on average, between 0 to 100 million, we have the Cenozoic. Right. And then now you can see that the minute you reach there between about 250 million years, that speaks of the Mesozoic, and we have the Paleozoic. That obviously, if you measure from the beginning there, that actually stretches up to just about 650 million years ago, MYA. So now, in view of the diagrams they've given us that stipulate clearly the different the plant divisions that were found on Earth during the Paleozoic era. Okay, so what are those? What are those? Right, so we look at the answer to 1.4.2. 1.4.2, what is the answer to this? What are the plant divisions that were found on Earth there? All right, so you need to look very carefully and think of these, and think of these, and think of these. Right. Okay, and think of these. But obviously, this is pretty straightforward because you need to look at the mark here. Right, so if you look, for instance, up to there, the Charophytes, you look up to, for instance, the Bryophytes, the Pterophytes, and the Gymnosperms. Obviously, you can see that the Angiosperms are outside there. So, in other words, 1.4.2, because now you're looking at the mark. If these things are below here. Right, so you can see those three there. So, in other words, you have the Charophytes, the Bryophytes, this one's here. Okay, we're just looking at the diagram here, so we're picking the answers. That during the Paleozoic era, the diagram is very clear. So it shows the Charophytes, the Bryophytes, and the next ones as well, the Pterophytes. Right. Right, right, but obviously we're not done yet. So you have this, you have that, you have that, and you have next one. And you also have these ones here, what you call the gymno. the gymnosperms. Right, so you have these. So in other words, this is exactly these are the correct answers. Obviously, we're saying name the plant divisions that were found on Earth during the Paleozoic era. The Paleozoic era. So we are speaking about that era of about 400 million years. Okay, that is 400 million years, 500 million years, right, and slightly about 450 million years, and so on and so forth. We are happy. Next question. So in view of 1.4, let's get this one. 1.4.3. How many million years ago did seed plants arise on Earth? How many million years ago did seed plants arise on Earth? Okay, this one is pretty obvious. Right, it's pretty obvious. Right, so you can see that at this point, how many million years ago did seed plants arise on Earth? So on average, you are there. So the answer to 1.4.3 is actually 350 million years ago. Right, so 350 million years ago, that is when the seed plants arose on Earth. Okay, so that's when they arose on Earth, according to the diagram. Next question. Okay, we've seen the diagram already, and we're just answering questions based on the diagram. Give the specific name for the division in which liverworts, hornworts, and mosses are found. You need to give the scientific name. What are we looking for here? We're looking for the scientific name. So give the scientific name for the division in which the liverworts, the hornworts, and the mosses are found. 1.4.4. What is the scientific name? The scientific name for the division in which the liverworts, hornworts, and mosses are found. What is the scientific name in 1.4.4? Right, so you need to look at these very carefully and think. By the scientific name for the division in which the liverworts, the hornworts, and the mosses are found, right, it's actually this term here. And those are the bryophytes. Those are the bryophytes. Okay, so the bryophytes, it refers to the what? It refers to the division in which liveworts, hornworts, and mosses are found. All right. That is scientific name for the division in which we find the liverworts, the hornworts, and the mosses. What is that division? The division is called the division of the bryophytes. Okay, next question. Okay, you need to be able to start the diagrams below. Start the diagrams below and try to make sense of this. The diagram, we've already seen the diagram, but we're asking the question, which letters represent the following characteristics? The vascular tissue. Vascular tissue. So we're looking at 1.4.5 part A. We just need to put the letter there. Vascular tissue. Right. Which letter? Right. So is it letter A, B, C, D, E? What letter? Actually it's responsible for the representation of the following characteristics: vascular tissue. Right, vascular tissue. Right, so we can see clearly that vascular tissue will actually be associated with letter D. And obviously, you can see the effect of letter D. It actually relates to the Paleozoic era. Okay, and therefore, in view of vascular tissue, we have letter D. And then now in part B 1.4.5, which letter relates to the foreign characteristics of a fruit? There's a letter that relates to a fruit. That's obvious. The fruit relates to plants, and the plants relate to the things here. We call the A, the angiosperms, etc. So you have A, because we understand that fruits themselves relates to plants, and they are interconnected with the foreign characteristics of fruits and the angiosperms. Okay, we have to look at these in some greater depth. Now, also, it's very important that when you look at these three groups of millions of years ago, the MYAs, we have what is considered to be the ancestor of all land plants. There is the ancestor of all land plants. What does it mean to speak of the ancestor of all land plants? The oldest one. The oldest of all plants that are on land. What plant is this? What kind of a plant is this? There's a plant that is the oldest of all of them. So you can mention this plant, that one, there are too many plants on Earth. There are too many plant species. And we agree there are many. But what is considered to be the ancestor of all land plants? Which one? Right, so the answer to 1.4.6, the ancestor, why do you discuss these? But I'm obviously testing the waters to see how familiar you are with some of the biological concepts in life sciences. Right, the algae is the ancestor of all land plants. The algae. You understand that? The algae. So the algae is considered to be the ancestor of all what? Of all land plants. All together. Next question. Okay, so you need to know the algae is the ancestor of all land plants. There's just a characterization there. All right. One of the oldest of plants on land. Okay, now if you look at 1.5, we're looking at data and we're looking at the graphs here. The data in the graph below represents the number of springbark. The springbark and the cheetah in the Namakwa Game Reserve over 65 years. The springbark is the natural prey of cheetah. The springbark is the natural prey of cheetah. Okay, the natural carry capacity for springbark in this reserve is 325. The natural carry capacity of springbark in this reserve is 325. After this number was exceeded, the management of the reserve decided to introduce a culling program. There's a graph here. The graph showing the springbark and cheetah populations in the Namakwa Game Reserve from 1955, from the year 1955 to the year of the pandemic, 2020, of the COVID-19 pandemic. Or COVID-19, obviously. It started mostly in 2019, but in South Africa, it hit South Africa hard and it reached our shores in the year 2020, leading to a hard lockdown across South Africa. Okay, we have the number of animals there. with 50 animals, with 100 animals, and so on. The years, we have 1955, we have 1960. So in 1965, we're moving in steps of 5 years. Name the relationship between shitters and springboks. The relationship between the shitters and springboks. What is the relationship between the shitters and springboks? Okay, it's an easy one. What is happening here? Okay, for example, if you look at this graph here, right, the number of the animals. So, right, in 1955, you can see there are some animals there between 0 and 50. But also, graph B is showing some animals there that way 150. And then from 150, the animals shot up to between 300 and 350. So they shot up to like 325. Okay. And then now they started going down again. And then they went up. And then they started going down. So you can see, therefore, the fluctuation that they're going up. So in other words, the number of the animals, the number was increasing, decreasing, and it was fluctuating. So what is the relationship between the cheetahs and the what? And the springboks? Okay, that's an easy one because you can see the fluctuation, but also you know that the cheetahs, they love meat. Okay, because you know that those cheetahs are carnivores. So right, they are meat eaters. Right, so they love meat a lot and they eat the springboks. So what we're seeing here, the kind of the relationship the examiner wants between the springboks and the cheetahs is the predator, is actually the predator, is the predator prey. Right, so we're looking at the predator prey relationship, which is, if you don't want to call it the predator prey relationship, you call it predation. You call it what? Predation if you don't want to. So in other words, what would the predator be? So at this point, the cheetah is going to be the predator and the springback is going to be the what? The prey, because the cheetah is meat eating. So it wants to eat and it loves eating the springbacks. So if the springback is not careful, the cheetah is going to be landing on it to scavenge for meat. Okay, because these cheetahs are carnivores. So the relationship is the predator-prey relationship, or is called predation. Next question. Okay, we've already seen the question and we've read much about the graphs, but now in 1.5.2, the examiner is saying you must, as part of the grade 11 requirement for the national, according to the national qualifications framework for life sciences, you must be able to provide definitions for the following words. What is carrying capacity? Okay, so they're saying the grade 11 learner must be able to define the terms. So obviously we're yet to look at a lot of the definitions of these terms here. But what is 1.5.2? So the first thing we define what we call the carrying capacity. What is the carrying capacity? What is the carrying capacity? Carrying capacity refers to the maximum. Right, it refers to the maximum population size. It refers to the maximum population size that an ecosystem, right, that an ecosystem can support. Okay. So in other words, here we're saying carrying capacity, it refers to the maximum population size that an ecosystem can support. So we are looking now at culling. What is culling? So we have defined carrying capacity. What is carrying capacity? The maximum population that an ecosystem can what? Can support. That is called the carrying capacity. So what is culling? Right, so we define culling. Right, so what is culling? We define it. Culling refers to, or it simply means selectively killing organisms. Selectively killing organisms to reduce their population size. Their population size. Okay, culling refers to selectively killing organisms to reduce their population size. So culling, you actually selectively kill organisms to reduce their population size. Okay, if this is not the case, you must focus on the removal of animals of inferior quality. Removal, right? So the removal, okay, this is very interesting because you can speak about the removal, right? The removal of animals, right? Removal of animals of inferior quality, of inferior quality, or it refers to of inferior quality to old for breeding, for breeding, right? For breeding from a herd, or flock. Removal of animals of inferior quality to old for breeding from a herd or flock. So culling can be defined in these two ways. So you choose one of them to define culling. And obviously we have defined carrying capacity and we have also defined culling. Move to the next question. Okay, we've already read the story and we've looked at the graphs. These graphs have just been carried forward, but we're answering the questions. Which line, A or B, represents the cheetah population? Okay, so there are two lines. There's line A here and there's line B there. Which one refers to the cheetah population there? Okay, so clearly it is obvious what it refers to the cheetah population, or that represents the cheetah population. So in 1.5.3, it is actually graph A that represents the cheetah population. Graph A represents the cheetah population. Because why would that be the case? Okay, there are a couple of reasons. Obviously, one would see that, but one of the most important reasons, you can see that the cheetahs themselves are more stable than the other one. So this is more stable. It doesn't like fluctuate a lot, but this B fluctuates a lot because it started at 150 and then it went up. But look at now, it was at 350, but now at some point they were like about just above just above 100. So you really can see that there was a decrease, a sharp decrease here. And now, and this is symbolic because the sharp decrease here means that very likely a lot of the springbucks were being eaten, um, by the predator. The predator being the cheetah. So the cheetah was eating a lot of those springbucks. So that kind of thing. So obviously it is clear, therefore, that which line A or B represents the cheetah population. So we've seen that A itself represents cheetah population because we can see the cheetah population is a bit more stable there. It's a bit more stable. Next question, 1.5.4. Okay, we've read the story. Between which years did the springbok population exceed the carrying capacity? Between which years? Because remember that the natural carry capacity for springbok in this reserve is 325. Right. So in other words, if they reach 325, there, because you can see between, this is about 50 units there, it's 50, then you add another 50, you get 100, you get another 50, you get 150, you add another 50, you get 200, add another 50. So obviously at this point, if you're saying between which years did the springbok population exceed the carry capacity? So in other words, it is actually, you can see that it did not quite exceed there, but here it exceeded. Here it just reached there. Okay. So what is then the answer to this? Right. So the answer to this would be, because we're teaching you how to analyze graphs as well. And so that demonstrates to us that, for example, right, between the years 1990, 1.5.4 answer. Right. It was between the years 1990 and 1995. 1995. Right. So between 1990 and 1995, you can see that it exceeded there. So we really are saying, therefore, between which years did the springbok population exceed the carry capacity? So it exceeded 325 because the carry capacity is 325, and that was between 1990 and what? In 1995. Okay. Next question. Or in this question now, we're saying, in which year was the culling program introduced for springbok according to the graph? Okay, let's look at these very carefully. Let's look at these very carefully. So now the selective killing of the animals, called culling. In which year was the culling program introduced for springbok according to the graph? So we're looking at 1.5.5. So 1.5.5. So that would mean, therefore, at this point, we can see that in the year 1995, in the year 1995, in the year 1995. Right, so in the year 1995, we can see that the culling program was introduced for springbok according to the graph. Why would you say that? Because suddenly there was just a very sharp decrease after that. Okay, next question. Okay, we know the information about the game reserve. Uh, Name one other density-dependent factor besides predation that could naturally reduce the springbok population. We need to name one other density-dependent factor besides predation that could naturally reduce the springbok. So we're saying the springbok population decreased here, or it reduced, but there can also be another density dependent factor. It might not be that the cheetahs were eating the springbugs, you know, because they can just go down because of another issue. For instance, if a lot of the animals, the springbugs die, they might be killed by a disease, you know. And now we can't blame the cheetahs and say the cheetahs are the ones that are eating the springbugs. So in 1.5.6, we are analyzing that, and we're saying they can always be a disease because they can get sick. Because if the animals get sick, they die. If it's not that, maybe if they did not suffer from a disease, okay, like COVID would kill people, for instance, and so the disease could a disease can make animals to die. Or what else can make the animals to die? It can also be competition. It also be what? Can always be competition for food. Maybe there was a drought. Right. It can always be competition for food. You see, if there's a drought, or not only competition for food, maybe there was a drought and water was less. Or there were too many and suddenly there was no space for them. So that is what can reduce the animals there as well. Okay, so the animals themselves will therefore decline in population because of those factors. Either they fall sick because of a disease, or there's competition for food and the food is limited, or there is less water because of a drought, or something like that, or the space is limited because there are too many, because suddenly they actually exceeded the carry capacity. So if there are too many there, that affects the availability of resources for them, because they tend to compete for the same resources. Okay, as I promised that we shall speak about these important plants, right? So these plants are extremely important for us. Right, let's look at the plants, at the flowers. Right, study the diagrams of the two flowers below. Okay, we have nice flowers here. We have flower one and we have flower two. Flower one and we have flower two. Name the division, the taxa to which flowering plants belong. The division, name the division or taxa to which flowering plants belong. What is the division? Okay, this is pretty straightforward. What is the division? Or we call the taxa, like a taxonomy, a division or a taxonomy. It's a level to which the flowering plants belong. Okay, I'm sure you know that. There are certain plants that are called the flowering plants. Where do they belong? To which taxonomy, or to which division, to which level? So they belong to what you call the spermatophytes. They belong to spermatophytes, or they belong to the angiosperms. They belong to the angiosperms. Okay, so this is extremely important. So you must be able to study the diagrams of the two flowers below and name the division or the taxonomy, the taxa, right, to which the flowering plants belong. So right, flowering plants belong to what you call spermatophytes, or you can say they belong to angiosperms. Next one, 2.1. Study the diagrams of the two flowers below. So you have flower one and you also have flower two. Okay, you need to be able to supply labels for structure A, well, B, and structure C. In other words, what is A? This one. What is B. And what is C? Okay, so we are yet to look at flowers in detail and label these, but you must know these basics. Right, so this one is called, A is called the anther. A is called the anther. Right, and well, B is called this one is obvious, is called the corolla, right? And there is C, this little thing here, what do you call it? We call it the stigma.
Stigma.
Well done. Call it the stigma. So obviously we've seen that A is called the anther, and we're yet to look at labeling flowers, etc. We've seen that B is called the corolla, and this one is called the stigma. Okay, we're yet to spend time on flowers and the spermatophytes and the angiosperms, etc. Right. You must be able to start these flowers. Flower one versus flower two. Must be able to study these. Give the letters of the parts of flower two that will drop off soon after fertilization has occurred. Okay, we must give the letters of the parts of flower two. They are part of flower two that will drop off soon after fertilization has occurred. What parts will drop after fertilization has occurred? Right, so it's easy, this one. We know that part B after fertilization will drop off, right? In other words, so we realize that the corolla will drop off. We know that part C will drop off. The stigma will also drop off. Right, so but we also know that part F will drop off after fertilization has occurred. Those parts that drop off. Right, there's also part G will drop off. Right, so parts B, C, F, G will drop off. Okay, so these are the parts that will most certainly drop off after fertilization has occurred. Okay, so just note that. And they're pretty very, very straightforward. After fertilization has occurred, you can, obviously we're referring to flower two. After fertilization has occurred, the top parts of the flower will most certainly do what? Drop off. Okay, next question. Right, which flowers one or two above is wind pollinated? Okay, it's obvious. Right, which flower one or two above is wind pollinated? Obviously, we can see the anther hanging outside there, and therefore it is flower one. Flower one. Which flower one or two is wind pollinated? It's clearly flower one. That is wind pollinated. Flower one. That is wind pollinated. That is wind pollinated. So it's flower one. Next question. Give two visible reasons for your answer in 2.1.4. Okay, here are the reasons there. Right, reason number one, their stigmas. Their stigmas are large. Their stigmas are large, or they are feathery. Right. So in other words, their stigmas are large or they're feathery. Right. Number two. Okay. So you need to answer like this. You make some bullet points and avoid numbering because the examiner might start to think that you are numbering your answer. You must always use the numbering system in the question paper. Right. But also the things we call the stamens. The stamens are long, right? The stamens are long, or they happen to protrude. They protrude out of the flower, out of the flower. The stamens are long, stroke protrude, meaning show out of the flower. Okay, most importantly, we noted that one, that the anthers, the anthers are large. That's why they're wind pollinated. You suggested that this flower one is wind pollinated. Most importantly, that is more evident because the anthers are large to produce. They are large to produce lots of pollen. Lots of pollen. The anthers are large to produce lots of pollen. Okay, so that is why we're suggesting that this flower one is wind pollinated. So those flowers that are wind pollinated, like that look like a flower one, the reasons for their ability to be wind pollinated are that the stigmas are large or feathery, the stamens are long, protrude out of the flower, but also we have to look at the actual detailed levels of flowers, but the anthers themselves are large to produce lots of pollen there as we saw. Next question. Name two unique factors or features of flowering plants that have allowed them to become the dominant plant species on Earth. Okay. The flowering plants have become the dominant plant species on Earth. Why? The flowering plants have become the dominant plant species on Earth. Okay. Flowering plants. Why? What are the two unique features that the flowering plants are having? Why are flowering plants the most on Earth? This is an interesting question. They're a lot. Why? So the answer to 2.1.6 is because of the notion of a fruit. Mostly these flowers become fruits. And now people love fruits. People love fruits because now the oranges become flowers first in the beginning, and then they become oranges. The lychees become first flowers, and then they become lychees. The pawpaws, the uh, you name it. The bananas themselves, they are flowers before they become bananas. So it's because these flowers themselves um, become fruits, and people love the fruits. So, and also now people even grow these plants. Why do they grow the flowering plants? People grow the flowering plants because they know that the flowers are going to become fruits. Okay, but also the flowering plants that have become the most dominant plant species on Earth is because of their flowers. People love their flowers. Why do people love their flowers? Some people love their flowers because of Valentine. There are many reasons for that. Because some people gift the flowers, they gift the flowers to their friends, to their family members, as certain symbols of appreciation, tokens of appreciation. And therefore, now, as a consequence, what is happening here is that the reason why these plant species have become the most dominant on Earth? Because the people love the fruits. They love the fruits. Next question. Right, if you look at 2.2, if you look at 2 point what? 2.2. Okay, right back. 2.2 is about South Africa perspective tuberculosis. We agree that tuberculosis is a big problem, TB. It's a big problem in South Africa. People, sometimes you just find somebody coughing because coughing is just a symptom. A person who's coughing doesn't mean that everybody who is coughing has TB, but some people who cough, they cough because they have tuberculosis. What is tuberculosis? We look at that. So, in other words, start with the diagram and read the passage below. You're reading the, we start the diagram and read the passage. Here's the diagram. And then now we're going to read the passage below. Tuberculosis is caused by the bacterium Mycobacterium tuberculosis and is a serious public health issue in South Africa. Because it's serious in South Africa, the government has deployed medication. If you go to the clinics, the medication for TB is there because it is serious. The government it's aware that it is a public health issue. About 450,000 right people develop the disease every year, and 270,000 of those are also living with HIV. Right, TB is South Africa's leading cause of death. In other words, a lot of the people who die in South Africa, if you find out why somebody died, normally they died because they were killed by TB. Is the leading cause of death. In other words, it's killing so many people. This coughing disease. About 89,000 people die from it every year. 89,000 South Africans die from TB every year. Because 89,000 people die from TB every year, the government must gear up. That's 10 people every hour. It means 10 people every hour die because of TB, because they are coughing. They die because of TB. HIV infection is a key factor in the TB epidemic. HIV sufferers have a higher risk of contracting TB. So the people who have the HIV virus are at higher risk of contracting the tuberculosis and a greater chance of dying as they have a weaker immune system, because the people who have the HIV virus have a weaker immune system. The people who have HIV have a weaker immune system. A vaccine called the BCG, which is the Bacillus calmette guerin, is used to prevent TB. Okay, there's a vaccine, right? It is more effective in children, and its efficiency in adults is inconsistent. Okay, so there's a vaccine, which is the BCG, that is very effective in children. But now BCG, which is the Bacillus calmette guerin, its effectiveness in adults is not consistent. It's inconsistent. Right, looking at 2.2.1, name the genus to which the bacterium causing TB belongs. What is the genus to which the bacterium causing TB belongs? Okay, so obviously that has already been mentioned in the story. Right, tuberculosis is caused by the bacterium, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So in other words, the genus to which the bacterium causing TB belongs is actually the Mycobacterium. So it is the Mycobacterium. Mycobacterium. Next question. Right, so look at the next question. 2.2.2. Why is a bacterium, this we read the whole information there already. Why is a bacterium considered prokaryotic? Why? Why is a bacterium considered prokaryotic? Why? It's because it does not have a membrane. Right, it's considered prekaryotic because it does not have a membrane. A membrane bound. It does not have a membrane bound nucleus. Right. So in other words, the bacterium, why is a bacterium considered prokaryotic? Is because it does not have a membrane bound nucleus. Does not have a membrane bound nucleus. That is why uh, a bacterium is considered prokaryotic because um, its nucleus, it's not membrane bound. Its nucleus, it's not membrane bound. Next question. Okay, so we must be able to label um, the bacterium, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Right, so now label the structures A, B, C. So we need to label what is A and what is B and what is C. Right, because when you look at this bacterium, you must be able to label it. What is part A and what is part B and what is part C? So, all right, right, okay, okay. So if you look at 2.2.3a, A, B, C. What is A? What is B and what is C? Okay, let's look at that one. Right, so A is basically called the slime. It's called the slime capsule. So this one is called the slime capsule. Called the slime capsule. B. What is B called? It looks like a little tail of the bacterium that causes, which is the bacterium that causes uh, coughing and all those kinds of symptoms. And that is killing about 89,000 people every year in South Africa, but it's killing about 10 people every hour in South Africa. Right, this little tail is called the flagella. It's called the flagella. Right, so the part B is called the flagella. is called the flagella. And then there's part C. Right, part C is actually very important. Right, so it's called it's an important part of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And what is it called? It is called you must be able to label the structure of the tuberculosis, but that is called the nucleoid.
Sorry, sir, can I ask something?
Yes, please.
The slime capsule is what protects the bacteria from toxic chemicals, right?
Please come again.
The slime capsule is
Yeah, the
what
slime
protects
capsule, right? Yeah, the slime capsule,
the
by the slime
bacteria.
capsule, yeah, I mean A is the slime capsule. That one.
Okay.
Please come again. What's your question?
The slime capsule is what protects the bacteria from toxic chemicals.
Most definitely. Well done, well done. So the slime capsule is what protects it from harmful chemicals. You know, well done. So yeah, that's correct. So the slime capsule is what actually protects the bacterium, protects the bacterium from harmful substances. You know, so that is why it's difficult to to defeat this bacteria. You know, it took many years. Um, in South Africa, people were dying of this disease before I was born. When I was young, I was told that my grandmother died of the disease. You know, my grandmother, the mother of my father, suffered from this tuberculosis, the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So yeah, so this slime capsule is actually obviously you must be able to identify the slime capsule. You must be able to identify the little tail, which is called the flagella. You must be able to obviously note the C, which is the nucleoid, but also the DNA part of this. Right. So you must be able to note the nucleoid here. Right. Okay. Right. Nucleoid, or we call that the DNA. We call that the DNA of the bacterium. Okay, so we have that. So those labels are extremely important over there. Okay, we continue. Right, obviously we are looking at these very carefully, and there's a bit more details on these. And this is big in South Africa because of the fact that many people are dying of the disease in South Africa. Right. So if they are killed by this bacterium. Right. So if you look at the 2.2.4, explain how BCG could give immunity. Obviously, we spoke about the fact that a vaccine called BCG, and that is the Bacille calmette guerin, is used to prevent TB. It is more effective in children, and its efficacy in adults is inconsistent. So BCG is not, its efficacy in adults in actually helping adults and protecting adults from TB is inconsistent. But in children, we agree that BCG is very effective. Okay, here's the question. Explain how the BCG would give immunity. How would BCG give immunity? Okay, let's look at that one. How? This BCG. Because BCG, what is BCG? It's a vaccine that is protecting the children from TB. It is used to prevent TB. So if it's given to children, the children will be protected because it's going to prevent the TB from affecting the children. So now we're saying, but how? Uh, explain how the BCG would give immunity. A person, we're explaining how BCG would give immunity. A person is given a weak strain A person is given a weak strain of the bacteria. Person is given a weak strain of the bacteria. Okay. The body. The body will produce antibodies. The body will produce antibodies to fight. The body will produce antibodies to fight the body will produce antibodies to fight the infection. The antibodies will protect them against a new or stronger infection. Of same germ. Okay? So a person is given a weak strain of the bacteria, because now explain how this one would give immunity. So this vaccine is given to people. So when the vaccine is given to people, normally the vaccine is given, a person is given a weak strain of the bacteria. So a vaccine, like a vaccine of COVID-19, it has the virus that causes COVID in it. So this BCG, for it to be used to prevent TB, it must have the bacterium in it. So a person is given a weak strain of the bacteria. By being given the BCG, if the kids are given the BCG, which is the Bacillus calmette guerin, it means the children are given a weak strain of the bacteria. Okay, so they're given this weak strain of TB. The body will produce antibodies to fight the infection. So when the person is given a strain of the bacteria which is weak, the body will produce antibodies to fight the infection. So the body starts fighting this infection because, in other words, the kids are being infected with TB. When the kids are being infected with TB, the body now fights. How does the body fight the TB, the infection? It produces antibodies. So the body will produce antibodies to fight the infection. When the body produces antibodies to fight the infection, the antibodies will protect them against a new, stronger infection of the same germ. Because of the antibodies, these antibodies will protect them against a new or stronger infection of the same germ. So when the body is busy fighting, it's busy developing, producing antibodies, it's busy fighting the infection that has been put into the children. And therefore, when it's fighting these, it actually, in the process, it will then protect them against a new or stronger infection. So in the end, then the children are protected, and they're protected from a new or stronger infection of the same germ. That is how the BCG would give immunity, because of the body produces antibodies when the weak strain of the bacteria is given. Okay, so we continue. Right. So also we've read the story. Tabulate one difference between a virus and a bacteria. What is the difference between a virus and a bacteria? Right. Because obviously we agree that a virus is not the same as a bacteria. But what is the difference between the two? Okay. So we look at that one. And so we look at the answer to 2.5. So first and foremost, we can see that there's something we call a virus and bacteria. Okay, but we ask ourselves, what is the difference between these? The virus is non-living. Viruses are non-living and very difficult to defeat. We spoke about the protein coats associated with viruses. The bacteria themselves are living. Next, the viruses themselves are acellular. Viruses themselves are acellular. We have already stated that bacteria themselves are actually prokaryotic.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, please.
Can I please add to your list?
Please come again.
Can I add to your list?
Yes, please. You can add to the list. Yes, please. You're welcome.
Viruses need a host cell to reproduce, while
Most definitely. Yes,
bacteria can
viruses need a
reproduce on
host
their
cell.
own.
Yes, they need a host cell to reproduce, right? Okay. Right. They need a host cell to reproduce. That's true. Okay. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And obviously, you've already mentioned that viruses themselves associated with what you call attain what you call a protein coat, but also the bacteria themselves are what? The bacteria have a cell wall or have in the place of a protein coat, they have a cell wall or they have a membrane. Membrane, okay. So you're right. Well done there, and thank you for mentioning that. Right, so you have this here. Right, obviously we said the viruses themselves are protein coat or a cell wall, all right, or a membrane. Right, so obviously you said that, I'm coming back to your point, where you said that they are, the viruses themselves require or need a host cell to reproduce, right? Okay. So you mentioned that again. So what do you think the corresponding point is going to be for bacteria?
A bacteria can reproduce on their own.
Yes, that's correct. So in other words, here bacteria can write just that what is it is. Bacteria can reproduce, can actually reproduce on their own. On their own. There we go. Okay. Interesting question there. So we found ourselves talking. Um, it's actually very, very interesting. Let's look at one more question. Right, so in 2.2.6, we shall actually explain why HIV patients have a higher risk of contracting TB and dying. Okay, there are these people who have HIV there. Why the HIV patients have a higher risk of contracting TB and dying? So we give the reasons for that. Just for only 2 marks there. Okay, so it's easy to answer this one. We answer why people with HIV have a higher risk of contracting TB. HIV lowers the body's immunity. Lowers the body's immunity. Right. So we agree that now a person who has HIV, their immune system is weak. So we understand, therefore, that to answer the question here, why the people explain why HIV patients have a higher risk of contracting TB and dying, because HIV lowers the body's immunity. Right, it lowers the body's immunity, or the white blood cell, right, or you can say the white blood cell count. Therefore, it cannot defend the body against TB. HIV lowers the body's immunity, or it lowers the white blood cell count. Therefore, it cannot defend the body against TB. That is the reason why HIV. So because if the HIV lowers the body's immunity, it means therefore the white blood cell count, therefore, it cannot defend the body against TB. Okay, so that is something that is very important. All right, now the time is it's 6 minutes after 8. Right, so I will see you again. You can let me know when, maybe tomorrow. What section is your teacher doing, or you're on holiday and obviously your teacher was doing a given section? What section was it? Do you know? Can you remember?
We were doing population last term.
All right, that's excellent. So it's part of what I'm going to be discussing as well tomorrow. But yeah, but you saw some parts of the population thing and the relationship between those animals. But there's a lot on population that is coming here. Okay, I've prepared a lot on population. So yeah, but we shall continue. When can we meet? You let me know when we can meet. Either we meet tomorrow or we meet Wednesday. And we continue looking at more life sciences in detail, but also looking at the theory that underpins the whole syllabus for both papers 1 and 2. Okay.
Okay, so I think we can meet on Wednesday because I'm going somewhere tomorrow.
That's fine. Okay, so it can be Wednesday. If it's not Wednesday, it's Thursday. If it's not Thursday, it's Friday. If it's not Friday, it's Saturday. So you decide on the time. Okay. So
Okay.
that's okay. Wednesday, it's okay with me. And I'll be looking at life sciences for grade 11 in detail, just to make sure that you master life sciences and you get the level 7 you need to get to varsity. Okay.
Okay, so
Okay, thanks a lot then. I'll post the video in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so like I said, when I post the video, it takes time to settle. It takes like a couple of minutes, But yeah, then you can watch it. Now, when you watch the video, you need to have a book, our own book for life sciences, and you write down the things, you note down these things. I know some of the structures are difficult um, I can always send you pictures of some of these. I can send you the documents so that you can be able to um, scribble this, because you need to have these things in your book, because it's not enough to watch a video about life sciences or mathematics and not write anything. Then the learning is not effective. Okay, but yeah, I'll see you on Wednesday and we shall continue with more life sciences in detail. Okay, thanks a lot and have a good evening, and I'll send you the video in the next couple of minutes. Okay, and
okay,
goodbye.
thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks. Goodbye.